So I wanted to get on here and discuss with you about my sister's toxicology report from April 11th, 1988, when her autopsy was performed 2 days after she was killed. Now, I need you to understand that the autopsy was performed April 11th, 1988. And her blood alcohol at that time was 0.319%, and her urine was 0.832%. And she had no barbiturates, no stimulants, no tranquilizers. There was cocaine metabolite present, and other drugs of abuse, none. And so, I needed you to understand this. This is a note to accompany toxicology report of Cheryl Ann Miller Bluma, date of death 4/9/88. At the time of this report, no further information is available on the quantitation of cocaine in the blood of this case. In view of the circumstances, however, it would appear unrelated to the cause of death. Although the mind-altering effects of cocaine can result in irrational behavior, the influence of alcohol in this case cannot be overlooked. The urine-to-blood ratio in this case seems unusually high. Many variables can influence this, but it would seem appropriate to figure that the blood alcohol in this case was at one time as high as 0.400%. This level is often associated with unconsciousness, but someone with a tolerance for alcohol may continue to function. Given that most individuals metabolize 0.015% alcohol per hour, this would represent a time span of perhaps 5 hours between the peak blood levels and the time of death, figuring another hour for absorption of the last drinks. We will figure at least 6 hours had passed since her last drink. Before being struck by the train, it would seem likely that she would have wanted to sleep during that time, given the depressive effects of alcohol. If that were the case, it would seem very likely to find any significant cocaine level in the blood. It has a plasma half-life of less than 2 hours, and about 10% of a dose would still remain after 6 hours. So this is what the coroner wrote. It was a note accompanying the toxicology report. And so her level of cocaine was blood cocaine level 0.073 mg/L. So it's a serum sample. So she had a trace of cocaine in her system. It was the actual levels of alcohol that were in her system. So, my question is this, we're going to go back to 1988 and what he said about the metabolism of it at 0.015% per hour. And he's saying that her last drink was 6 hours prior to her death. And so we know for a fact that when she went to Laura Littner's at about 11 a.m., she was intoxicated and or on drugs or both. And then when Carlos Whitlock picked her up between 11 a.m. and 11:35, let's say, a.m. that day, and brought her to the railroad tracks, she was still intoxicated when she left Laura Littner's house. So, with those levels, 2 days after her death, what would they be 2 days prior to her death? Would they have been greater? And how is it feasible that her last drink would have been 6 hours prior to being struck by that train, when in fact 2 days after her death, her levels were this high? Like, how does that work? Does the blood not after death, what happens to those blood level alcohol levels and it's 2 days later after death that the levels are, still at the zero. The blood was 0.319% and the urine was 0.832% 2 days after her death. So that's my question to a toxologist, and how do I find a toxologist that would actually, look at these 3 papers. This is it. 3 simple papers. Her levels of cocaine, her levels of alcohol, and the talk about it, figuring that blood alcohol in this case was at one time as high as 0.400%. Okay, so could it have been greater, prior to the train hitting her, a minute before the train hitting her? Could her blood alcohol and urine alcohol levels be greater than what they're saying and in this toxicology report? So we're talking 2 days after her death. And this is this is unbelievable. And I know that, researching blood alcohol levels, anything over 0.40 is literally you're unconscious. And then anything going up from that 0.40, you're looking at, organs failing, you're not breathing. Could her levels have been that high? And the fact that her last drink was 6 hours prior, I honestly don't believe that, because if her levels were this high 2 days after her death, then there's just no feasible way, and I don't know what happens to the levels after a death. And the autopsy isn't performed until 2 days later. I don't know what happens to those levels. Do they decrease? Do they keep metabolizing? What happens? I'm not a toxologist. I don't even know these answers. But it kind of, I need these answers, because I think that it would fill in some blanks and bring some understanding to the last drink at 6 hours prior to her death. Within 40 minutes from being picked up from Laura Littner's home, she was messed up. So, she walked from Jordy's to Laura Littner's. She did that, and she got there. And so from Jordy's, from 10 a.m. to whatever time she arrived at Laura Littner's, and then the time that she got picked up, which is all in the time frame from between 10 a.m. and 11:40 a.m. is when she was struck by the train. But it's got somebody, picking her up and bringing her to the train tracks. So, what were her levels, and what could they have possibly been 2 days prior, before she was killed and struck by the train? And of course, her death is undetermined, and there was a very minimal investigation done on it. It was so poorly done that anything that was done was never brought to the inquest. They sent a police officer with nothing but Laura Littner's statements. That was it. That's all they had. This one police officer knew nothing about anything. He couldn't answer anything in the inquests because there was no information given to him. So as far as this case is concerned, it was investigated, but the investigation was so poorly done that the coroner's office could not determine the death because there was not enough information. And so it's left open and undetermined. And in most cases, when the death is left undetermined, it's left undetermined. In her case, in this inquest, it stated that it needed to be investigated properly to determine if it was a homicide or a suicide. And so I did call Lake County, Waukegan, Illinois Police Department, and they gave me the detectives unit, and I'm still waiting to hear from them. I don't know if this will ever be investigated. This is a 33-year-old case that was investigated poorly, and I don't know if the Waukegan Police Department would just consider that good enough. Obviously, for the past 33 years, it's been called good enough. It's never been looked at. It's never been seen. It's never been talked about. And it's never been opened up and investigated by anybody. I think that, these toxicology reports, I'm no toxicologist, but I mean, common sense tells me that her levels were grander at the time of her death, that her blood level alcohol levels and her urine alcohol levels were higher at the time of her death. And that what happens 2 days after a person has been deceased? What happens to those blood levels, and alcohol levels? What happens to them is the question. Do they still metabolize? Or do they stop metabolizing? And I've Googled, trust me, Google. I've Googled everything. And it's not easy. I'm not educated in medical terms and medical language. So for me, reading about, I can read it, and it's comprehension and understanding, and understanding that metabolism, 0.015% per hour, and breaking that all down. I don't do those. I do. I mean, I could, but I think a toxicologist would be grander to just be able to, see this and say, okay, break it down to 2 days prior, and I believe that could be done. They do that in most cases in investigation. So here I am working at this situation, trying to figure it out. So that was my update on this toxicology report and what I had gotten, the note to accompany toxicology report. So, I mean, that's it. And this was signed by John Rohrbeck. And this was signed May 4th, 1988. So it was interesting that this was done in May, this accompanying note. And then also May 11th, this is dated. Well, that's fascinating. I'm just seeing this now. Evidence blood collected 4/11 in REC 4/19/88. I don't know what REC is. So 4/19 REC. So the blood was collected on 4/11, which would have been 2 days after she was struck by the train. And then the REC was 4/19/88. REC. I don't know what that is. So as you can tell, I am not familiar with any of this language. So for me to even know what REC is, maybe, I don't know. Anyways, these are her toxicology report. And I needed to update you on how the levels 2 days after, which would have been the autopsy that was performed. And that's the levels that they were at. And so it's, pretty interesting to read about the metabolizing and stuff. So, any toxicologists out there that are interested in a 1988 33-year-old case that's here, let me know. Thank you. Stay tuned for more updates on this. Cheryl Ann Miller Bluma, she was killed by train in Lake County, Waukegan, Illinois, and I am trying to find out if it was either murder or suicide, instead of it still being undetermined. There are facts in this case that are facts that are stated in her case. In the inquest, it's so contradicting. It is so misleading, and there's so much information that was not even given. It stays opened at the coroner's. It stays open until it's investigated to determine which one it is, homicide or suicide. So it's my goal to bring that close for my sister Cheryl Ann Miller Bluma. She deserves that. She deserves that honor to have that piece brought to a close. And she was 25 years old. She had lived from September of 1988 to April 9th of 1988 in Waukegan, Illinois. She had moved from Salem, Wisconsin to Lake County, Waukegan, Illinois in 88. So she spent a very few short months there and was considered a prostitute, drug addict by the police chief, the acting police chief at that time in 1988. And that it was, he said that witnesses said that she just walked onto the railroad tracks and did it in a timely fashion so that she could not be saved. But you can't, it's 150 feet away from the train station. And I believe that from where they are to where she was on the tracks, you couldn't see her. So it would prove impossible. But none of those statements were from the police chief and or any witnesses that he had spoken to were ever brought into her inquests. No information like that was ever given. There was only the statement from Laura Littner stating who picked her up and what, when and why or whatever, not even a why. And a statement from Laura Littner stating that Carlos Whitlock stated that he would make her pay for holding out on him. And so, these are statements that are in her inquest, and as the only statement that they had, and they had nothing else. They didn't have anything else. They had nothing to offer. They had nothing to give, and the coroner's office had to come to the conclusion of an undetermined situation here because they had nothing to go on, and left it open so that until it was investigated properly, that they could determine the cause, either homicide or suicide. So my goal is to be able to get that to happen. I think that the facts in this case are pretty overwhelming just from her inquest, and it's sad that, the judge in that inquest, maybe it was the coroner, I don't know, stated that, if they had to subpoena the police involved, that they would shut down the entire precinct. And it makes me so sad to know that they didn't even subpoena a single person. Not one single police officer that was involved in the case came to my sister's inquest to give information that they had acquired in her investigation. Not one single police officer. They sent a police officer that knew nothing about her case, and brought nothing from any one of those other police officers. My sister's death became another number in their system of the lost and forgotten souls that have undetermined deaths and are left forgotten. My sister's case has gone 33 years and nobody knows about it. Nobody's talked about it. Nobody's investigated it. Nobody's looked at it. Nobody even knew anything about my sister, Cheryl Ann Miller Bluma, and the way she died. And I think that is the most horrific thing. And my mother took that to her grave. She took that to her grave, knowing all of this, and knowing that nobody did anything. And to go on for 33 years, is it going to continue on for another 33 years? I mean, I understand the world is in disarray, and I understand that, but there are a lot of cold cases out there that are unsolved and undetermined, and in Illinois especially. There's a lot of deaths in Illinois. How many are undetermined? How many people died on the railroad tracks 150 feet either way from that station in Lake County, Waukegan, Illinois, in the 80s and onward? You know, how many people died on the rails, and they called it a suicide or a pedestrian train accident, and it was left undetermined if anybody ever went to these inquests to dispute that first one. They called my sister's a suicide, and thank God her ex-husband went to the second inquest to debate that and say that that was not a suicide, you know. And there was a lot of information given about a lot of stuff in the second inquest, like the fact that the police actually had 2 eyewitnesses putting Carlos Whitlock at the scene, picking my sister up and bringing her to the scene, and he was witnessed by a lineup of photos. He was pulled out and witnessed. That was the man that was with her there at the tracks at 11:40 a.m. The train struck my sister at 11:48 a.m. Why was he there with her at the tracks? Why did he pick her up and bring her down to the railroad tracks? The police did talk to Mr. Whitlock, and he had said that he was at the Video King and got movies and was with this mom and Betty and some girl. We can't find her anywhere. She is non-existent in this world. We can't find her. So, you know, he probably made this name up, you know, and so he said that that's where he was, and they went out to dinner. I don't know if police even went and checked his story to validate that, and see if that was even true. I just know that Carlos Whitlock, said he had not seen my sister Cheryl in 3 weeks, but he was eyewitnessed by 2 different people that day, picking her up and with her 8 minutes prior to her death. But he told the police, and you know, and the police confirmed in the inquest, the police officer they sent, yes, Mr. Whitlock was the pimp to Alabama Mary, a.k.a. Maria Chavez, and my sister Cheryl Ann Miller Bluma, and Laura Littner. So, you know, you've got the main man, the pimp, and he's running these girls. And he's also, you know, you have to keep in mind, Maria, who was with Cheryl that day, on the 9th, that morning, they parted ways at Jordy's hot dog stand, and Cheryl walked to Laura Littner's. I don't know where Maria went. And that day, my sister's killed, and that evening at 9 o'clock, Maria Chavez was killed. You know, so you got a lot of stuff that's going on in this investigation. You know, a lot of facts that transpired. And why did the police let this man go? Why did they believe his word, even though there were 2 eyewitnesses picking my sister up and was with her at the scene of where she died? You know, why was it? I'm baffled in that one part. Like, the man at the warehouse picked this man out of a lineup of photos, 10 white men, and he picked him out, and they believed Carlos. I am shocked and disgusted and appalled that my sister became a number in their system, and she became lost and forgotten and not ever once again cared about. And it just wrecks me. It makes me feel like there are many other people that this has happened to, and that you are not alone. You are not alone. If you lost a family member in '88 in Illinois, and their death is undetermined, you are not alone. You are not alone. And if the circumstances of their deaths is absolutely insanely suspicious and unbelievable, and the facts are in the inquest, and the statement that these facts are backed up by, and they let that person go, then it makes me believe that something more was about this case, and that the police, all those police officers involved, and that one particular person who picked my sister Cheryl up and brought her to the tracks that day. You gotta, those are questions that, you gotta ask these police officers, at what level do you start investigating? In that investigation, I'm baffled by how all of this has happened. And in here I sit for 33 years still waiting for something to happen. Something. And I am certain that I am not alone in this situation, and that there are many, many other people who are going through what I'm going through. And you would have never heard about this case. It was in the paper one time. Once. That's it. It was never spoken about again. Like I said, she became a number lost in their system and forgotten about, and I need to bring her, I need them to understand that she is just not another number. She was our sister. She had family. She called home 2 days prior. I need them to investigate this and bring closure to the family members that remain here waiting for that closure 33 years later. I mean, you gotta be able to, at some point, make that happen for people that have waited for years for this closure and understanding of what actually happened that day to my sister Cheryl Ann Miller Bluma. And this is her. Beautiful, beautiful individual. She was amazing, and she was never forgotten about by us. And that's what makes us keep driving forward to finding out what actually did happen to her that day. And so stay tuned for more updates. I am, right now hyper focused on trying to figure out the toxicology part of it, and also, I can't do anything about the investigative part of it because that is out of my hands. And I did make that phone call, so I don't know what it takes or what it entails to get her case investigated properly to come to that determination of homicide or suicide. I guess it would take an investigation solely and mostly to determine that, and that would be my goal. So stay tuned for any more updates that I can that I get. I will be updating often. And thank you. If there's any toxicologists out there that want to go over this, reach out to me on the vid. I mean, I will respond. Thank you.